Many thanks for staying with us. Ghana's Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, said on Friday that the first $600 million tranche of a $3 billion three-year extended credit facility has been received. The funds, according to Ofori-Atta, will be used for budget support and help bring down inflation. The International Monetary Fund's Executive Board on Wednesday approved the $3 billion three-year rescue loan, paving a potential path out of Ghana's worst economic crisis in a generation. Announcing the approval, the IMF said in a statement that securing timely debt restructuring agreements with external creditors would be essential to successfully implementing the extended credit facility loan aimed at helping Ghana overcome immediate policy and financing challenges. The fund also said the new loan would help mobilize additional external financing from development partners and provide a framework for completing its debt restructuring. To speak on this, I have two guests. Professor Lord Mensah, financial economist at the University of Ghana, Accra, Ghana. I also have Dr. Joseph Obeng, President, Ghana Union of Traders Association, GUTA, Accra, Ghana. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on Village Square Africa. I will start with you, Dr. Obeng. If you can, could you tell us a bit what this loan is about?
Yeah, this loan is about bringing confidence into the economy of Ghana. It's about bringing credibility to the economy of Ghana. The last couple of months have seen businesses suffering. Our economy was on the verge of collapse. That government itself have admitted that we need the IMF to salvage the economy. And so the fact that it's bringing confidence back into the system, the fact that it's bringing credibility into the system, the fact that it's going to bring a pushing up our foreign reserve that has depleted to only about 2 weeks of import cover means a lot to us. It means that it's going to rescue our economy. All that business community seeks is the stability of our local currency, because that has been the bane of our problems. That last couple of months ago, most of our businesses saw the depletion of our capital of over 50% due to the depreciation of the cedi. And that's the fact that the coming of 600 million has come to shore up the forest is also very important for us. Even the speculation around it have made.
Okay, we'll come back to you, Dr. Obeng. Let's see if we can bring in Professor Mensah. My question will basically be about the sentiments being expressed in the financial circles about this loan.
Can you repeat your question, please? I think you will.
Okay, I'm asking about what's being said about this loan in the financial sector, in informed academic and financial sector in the country.
Yeah, well, Ghana has purpose for this loan and getting from that. And the purpose is the balance of the support. Ghana at the point that run out of funds. And as we speak now, we are somewhere deficit of about 4 billion in terms of our, balance of payment support. So we called in for, 3 billion IMF support. And through that, we got, 600 million. And I call this first tranche as more or less an emergency tranche, in a sense that IMF has watered down some of the conditionalities that would have called for these funds to be extended to us. And one of them was to have a domestic debt restructuring. Of course, it makes sense to call for a debt restructuring because any country that is debt-ridden, I mean, not even countries, at our own individual level and even at the business level, if you owe and you are given any support, if you don't take care, you end up using it for to settle your debt. And as a result of that, IMF gave us a condition, and the condition is that we should have our debt restructured. Government of Ghana was able to go through to get the domestic debt restructured, and what was left was the external debt. And if you look at it clearly, hello, can you hear me, please? Hello?
Go ahead, we can hear you.
So if you look at our external debt, yes, we needed to get an assurance from our external creditors before we could get the first tranche. So from our academic perspective, we can tell Ghanaians, and we've been warning them, that they shouldn't be happy. The 600 million is just a small fraction anyway. But, the signal that the 600 million gives is what we are looking out for to be the benefit of the entire program. The 3 billion is nothing to write about, but the benefit has to do with the conditions that the IMF gives the government. As we speak now, we can clearly look at the conditions, and the conditions are more or less heavily weighted towards revenue generation rather than compelling the government to cut down expenditure. That is where our worry is. As we speak, government has given, through the conditions, we have a target of 18.5% to GDP of revenue target. And as we speak now, we're doing about, 15.7. And where would the Revenue Enhancement Council? It will come from the ordinary Ghanaian. So already government has introduced about 3, streams of taxes, which are running. And by so doing, we feed on to prices. Remember how inflation as a country was somewhere around, 54 point something, brought down to now it's going down, we're looking at 40-something percent. So the fight against inflation, together with the taxes that are being introduced. So you look at 2 streams. The Monetary Policy Committee is fighting against inflation. If you look at the IMF program, quite conflicting in a sense that the same program is telling the Monetary Policy Committee to tighten the policy rate. Tighten the policy rate means that, they want to bring inflation down. The same, program is telling is indicating that government should enhance revenue by introducing taxes. When you introduce taxes, businesses are not going to absorb, those taxes. They will feed it into the prices, and prices are going to go up on the market. So I see a situation of a stalemate of, more or less fighting, inflation. Take that aside. If you take, what we call it, interest rate, we were anticipating that, government in its own approach through the IMF program would have had some, expenditure cuts, which will reduce the huge budget deficit that we've been reading over the past, years. By so doing, government ceases to or reduce its borrowing from the market. And if government reduces its borrowing from the market, it has a way of, feeding into interest rate structures. That is more or less through the corridors of the bank. Now, in Ghana, we have a way of pricing loans. We have what we call the Ghana reference rate, plus a premium that the banks add to determine whether the person who is borrowing or lending is likely to be exposed or not. Now, if you split this into 2, the Ghana reference rate, which is the base of all loans, has a component which, the Treasury bill is part of it, and then the monetary policy is also part of it. Now, if Treasury bill is not able to come down through government appetite for borrowing, because there's no signal in the entire program that government is going to reduce its borrowing. And remember, we're going into election year. And in any election year, government borrows in excess. To some extent, we find it difficult to revert back to our original state, 3 years after election. So we were wondering I mean, how is government going to handle this situation?
Professor Mensah, let me interject quickly so we can, break it down for the ordinary man to really get a grasp of the explanation you're given. I sense a cautious optimism in your comment. In the first part of it, am I right? Secondly, from the layman's point of view on social media, on Twitter particularly, the comments I saw under the IMF managing director, that's Kristalina Georgieva's post on the approval, there was a lot of skepticism and fear that it's yet another ploy to enslave the country. But I sense from you cautious optimism that this could help Ghana get out of the debt situation. So for somebody who does not understand what this loan is about, and they're going on social media and expressing all of this skepticism, how would you explain to them the pros of the loan?
Yeah, it is a program. Of course, the loan is not money to be put in people's pocket. It's just to come and show up our balance of payment support. As I indicated to you earlier, we are in a deficit of about 4 billion, and this 600 million is part of the 3 billion that we are requesting from the IMF. But like I was indicating to you earlier, it is a program, but we the academics, and as I sit here, I get worried how the program is tilted towards revenue enhancement rather than, looking at expenditure cuts by the government. As we speak, we've been asking the government to reduce its expenditure through reduction of number of ministers and all those. The program never touched on this. We were looking at programs that will force the government to cut down expenditure, by so doing, not to go on the market to go and borrow. Now, someone will say the revenue enhanced, program will also reduce budget deficits, will make money available to the government, and by so doing, government will not go to the market to go and borrow as expected. And you see, we are looking at the competition between the private sector and then the government. If government is not active, recruiting, the same program is indicating that government should freeze employment, reduce employment to a certain scale. And if government is not borrowing, we expect that the structures of the economy will build up where the private sector will have access to funding. And if the private sector gets access to funding, it's going to expand. And through the expansion, it will employ. So business will shift from the corridors of the government to the corridors of the private sector. But we don't see that in this program. It is a program that will more or less, cause pain to Ghanaians. But at the end of the day, the benefit that will come out of it will cause more pain than, anything else that we know, in this country. So from where I sit, what I would say is that we're expecting a program which would have called for more expenditure cuts. But what we see in this program, that whoever takes over the next election will have to go with the situation.
All right, Prof, I will come back to you. I want you to speak a little further on what role the election will play with this loan and what impact it will have for the incoming administration and all of that. But let's go to Dr. Obeng. I want to ask you, Professor Mensah says there is every likelihood this loan is going to cause a lot of pains for Ghanaians. But the minister says the funds, your finance minister says the funds will be used for budget support and help bring down inflation. When as an ordinary person, I read something like that, I tend to believe, if inflation comes down, that means my earnings will go up. And then somebody who is in the financial circle is saying that this will cause more pain for the Ghanaian citizen. I want to hear your perspective. You're muted, sir. Can you unmute?
Yeah, what he's saying is very true. It's going to cause a lot of pains. Even before we were able to get the IMF deal, were imposed on us. So what we are expecting now is the conditionalities that is coming to bear on us. That we are still going to talk to government to find ways to fund mitigating measures that will deal with these conditions. And that the money that has come is this deal. And what we are expecting now is also the reduction of the monetary policy rate, as the professor said. And it's very important that the three indicators that make business thrive, that's exchange rate, the interest rate, and the inflation, is dealt with the coming of this IMF deal. Otherwise, work done is zero. And that we are expecting that inflation comes down, the monetary policy rate is reduced so that businesses can thrive again, and then we also transfer some of the gains to the consuming public who have suffered at the high prices of goods and services for the last couple of months.
There's something I would like you to explain, really. You're both expressing, while on one hand you say it's going to cost pain, there are some gains expected at the end of the day. But in clear terms, for somebody who is very skeptical about this loan, how will it help pave a potential path out of what is being described as Ghana's worst economic crisis in a generation? That's something I'm sure a lot of persons would want to know.
Yeah, please, if you can come back again.
Okay, I'm asking that one of the skepticism being expressed is this is a loan. However you look at it, it's a loan. How will it, you're on both sides. You're not saying that it's going to be all bad. You're not saying it's not going to be all good. So what I'm asking is if you can maybe in simpler terms explain how it will pave the way, a potential part out of what has been described as Ghana's worst economic crisis in generation.
Yeah, I think what we have to do is what we failed to do in the past is to learn from the past, because we've gone to IMF for 17 times. I think this is the 18th one, and that we did not learn a lot from it. So it's not about going to the IMF, but it's what we do with the advantages that IMF bring to bear. And that's what we are going to also push government to be mindful. The work done is zero. But the IMF itself does not seek destruction of businesses. And that we went for IMF, and the outcome was that businesses collapsed. And that's what we keep on reminding government, that they should be able to still talk with us to find an alternative, workable alternatives, so that those things that conditionalities that may not help us will be dealt with in the media budget review. So we are still going to engage with government to find ways to fine-tune some of the conditions so that businesses can survive along this program.
All right. Yeah. Doc, we will go on a short break. Prof, we'll be back with you. I have questions about the connection with the elections, repayment, and all of that when we return. Do stay with us. Good to know you're still with us. We're still looking at the pros and cons of Ghana's receiving of $600 million. That's the first tranche of a $3 billion IMF loan. We still have Professor Lord Mensah, financial economist at the University of Ghana. We also have Dr. Joseph Obeng, President, Ghana Union of Traders Association. And joining us for the second part of the conversation, we have Dr. Alex Apambeng. He is a fiscal policy expert. He's also in Accra, Ghana. Gentlemen, it's always a pleasure to have you share your thoughts. We need to let Prof go, so I'll just conclude with my earlier thoughts with you. You mentioned, I couldn't quite get you clearly about the connection yes, you did say that elections are coming soon, and that will imply there's a possibility that governments will change. So my question would be, how will this impact on the loan, and what is the repayment plan for the loan? Is there a repayment plan, really? Okay, I think we've lost the Prof. Will try and get him back and see if he can respond to that. But since Dr. Ampambeng is just joining us now, I will come to you and ask, they said the fund, IMF says the new loan would help mobilize additional external financing from development partners and provide a framework for completing its debt restructuring. First off, what is debt restructuring? Because when you hear debt, the ordinary person would say, that means we're in trouble. Is there a good and bad debt restructuring, or is debt restructuring part of the loan scheme that we have now?
Right, thank you for having me. The debt restructuring is simply a way to arrange to postpone the payment of the debt. It can also be a way to ask for reduction in the interest rate or on the principal, so that it will kind of give the country a leeway in its fiscal challenges that we are going through. Debt restructuring at this time, it has both pros and cons, obviously. And the challenge for Ghana has been the domestic front. Ghana has undertaken a massive domestic debt restructuring. And what that means is that government has been unable to honor some of the government commitments, including bondholders. And currently, there are issues even involving the pension funds. So you have people who are going on pension, but not being able to access their funds, and most of which are old people that sometimes need this money for their medical bills, some of whom don't have any dependents, and therefore it is the proceeds of some of those bonds that keep them moving. The other challenge with the domestic debt restructuring that Ghana did is that most of the banks are almost at the verge of collapsing, because with the government debt that it owes, which is about $37 billion, a third of it is owned to the local banks or to the banks in Ghana. Now, government having to do the debt restructuring means Ghana government does not have the money to give to the banks. And a country going through these difficult times, this is the time that you need your banks to be performing, the time that we need the banks to be able to give out loans and other financial support to businesses. But if this is the time that the banks themselves are struggling, then the recovery is going to be a big challenge. About 2 weeks ago, the banks published a financial statement. And I think it was about just 2 or 3 that were able to report positive figures. Almost all the banks in Ghana are recording record losses. And that really put challenges on their ability to support the private sector to get us out of this mess. The external creditors are also being, they just set up a creditor committee, which is the key requirement in restructuring Ghana's external debt. That I cannot tell for now what the deal we are going to get, because they only give assurances to the IMF that they will support Ghana's debt restructuring internationally. But as of now, the creditor committee was just set up, I think, about a week or 2 ago, and therefore not much information exists currently on what Ghana will get. One from China, whom we owe 1.7 billion, from the multilateral agencies, and also individual and other institutional bondholders who are all external. So there's not much information on the external debt restructuring, but there are assurances from Ghana's creditors that they will support Ghana in restructuring its external debt.
Okay, before I go back to Dr. Obeng, I want to stay with you and ask you the concerns you raised about the banks. It's quite worrying. How will is this loan going to help the banks in any way, and how will it?
No, this particular loan is unfortunately not going to support the banks. Already Ghana is running a huge budget deficit. So what that means is that this particular 600 million coming is straight up going to support government's budget. So kind of going to support government's existing commitments, which they have already planned in the upcoming budget or the previous budget. So the banks, unfortunately, will get nothing. However, the government has set up a fund which the IMF, so the World Bank, has promised to give $250 million. And the money is expected to come in by September. This fund is to support the banks who undertook the domestic debt exchange. These are the banks government owed them. So any bank that's going through difficult times, the idea is that this fund that the government has established, a kind of stability fund for the banks who are going through difficult times should be able to borrow on favorable terms to support their operations. But so far, the fund has been established, but not a penny has been paid into it. And Ghana is waiting for the World Bank to give the money in September. The idea is to put in total $1.5 billion. World Bank is paying that. The rest, I believe, will come from other development partners. Even though government has promised to put something in, the question is, where is the government going to get the money from? So, unfortunately, the banks' challenges will continue at least until September when the World Bank's money comes in.
All right, let's go to Dr. Obeng. I want to ask you the role you work with traders, unions, the private sector. What is the role of this sector in Ghana's economic growth and recovery, and how can that be strengthened by this IMF loan? Is it even connected? The banks are already not benefiting. Do we have Dr. Obeng? Okay, I think we've lost that connection again. So I'll just stay with you, Dr. Pambeng. I would ask about, there is something that Reuters was reporting earlier. Is that sources that are familiar with Ghana's new program has cautioned that authorities there face long negotiations with creditors. And then they pointed to Zambia. They said a similar process there has been marred by delays. I want to hear your thoughts. What are the similarities between both countries on this? And do you think that what is playing out in Zambia will reoccur in Ghana?
I expect similar one, if not even much more difficult one. And the reason is that Ghana's debt is widely spread between private equity investors, those who have purchased Ghana's bonds, who makes up substantial percentage, and also countries like China, who are not part of the Paris Club. In fact, the delay in even getting the creditor committee set up was because China was not willing to sit on the table with the Paris Club. And as you know, China, India, and a few other countries that Ghana owe who are not part of the Paris Club. And by the way, the Paris Club, we owe all of them $1.9 billion. And China alone, we owe China $1.7 billion, which is almost the same as what we owe the Paris Club members. In addition, Ghana's challenge has been a lot of our debts are also on Eurobonds. And restructuring some of these are different from multilateral or bilateral loans. It's so easier for Ghana to negotiate with the World Bank, for example. And it's so easier for Ghana to negotiate with individual countries or the Paris Club. We can comfortably get a deal with them. But when it comes to negotiating with bondholders, that has a different challenge altogether. And they make up the majority of Ghana's debt. So it is going to be a very difficult one. I must really be honest. And I think Ghanaians should embrace themselves for more challenges. Of course, they have given the assurance, which is what led to IMF giving us the money in the first place. But the assurance is just the first stage. They sitting down and agreeing to the debt restructuring. Remember, each partner coming to the table as part of the creditor committee is coming to protect their interests. The creditor committee is co-chaired by China and France. So France is representing the Paris Club and China is representing itself. Now, how do we find a consensus? Because already China has really made it a bit difficult for Ghana in not trying to sit with the Paris Club members. So I really do think that challenges will come in, but Ghana do have very good relationship with China. And I do hope that at the top level, this is where we will need the president and all the big guys at the top to possibly have more detailed presidential level conversation and engagement so that the guys sitting on the creditor committee will look at Ghana more favorably. Otherwise, that to me is going to be a challenge. But for the Eurobond restructuring, that's a tall order and it really presents lots of challenges ahead for Ghana.
A lot of concerns and skepticism being expressed from you, Dr. Obeng, and Lord Mensah. I was keeping a question for Lord Mensah, but it seems he won't be reconnecting with this conversation. So I'm going to pose that same question to you, and that has to do with, we hear there's going to be a change of government, possible change of government soon with the elections approaching, and then we have this loan. How is that going to play out with the repayment plan? What is the repayment plan for this loan?
Usually, this is an extended credit facility that runs between 3 to 5 years. So Ghana were given 3 years. The repayment will not start, I believe, until the repayment, I think, is on about 10 years or so. So there's not immediate pressure on Ghana for the repayment. The only challenge now, talking of the impact it's going to have, so whoever comes into power, these are sovereign debt and it has already been secured. So whether the government in power retains power or a new government is formed after 2024, the obligations or the commitment of the nation is already there. The other concerns maybe we need to look out for is that this particular program is more towards tax-based fiscal consolidation. You know, there are two ways you could have consolidated the issue. So either you go to the expenditure cut consolidation or tax-led. Unfortunately, there's not much on the expenditure controls by the program. What that means is that the government will still be free to spend whatever way they want. And usually some of the challenges Ghana have been having is off-budget spending and also election year overspending. And these are the things that got us here in the first place. So seeing this program not bringing in more expenditure controls, I believe also pose serious concerns with election just around the corner. And we do believe that IMF could have done more on this particular issue.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alex Apambeng, for speaking with us on this.